Hi, thank you so much for joining me in the Louie file today. I hope this finds you well. Today, we're going to look at a lot of verses. This may have to extend into a couple of videos. I'm not sure yet. I don't want to run through it too fast, but today I want to talk to you about education or revelation. Now, on the front end of this, let me be clear. I am not opposed to education in any way. I say read all the books, get all the classes and all the teaching that you could possibly find if that's what your thing is. But I think what I want to do with this study is to just look at how, when it comes to God and the things of God and the wisdom of God, mere education, just book learning or schooling or university or online classes, which once again I'm not against at all, are not, but those things are not the same as revelation. In fact, one set of verses that I didn't even have marked down just kind of came to me. You know, there's a story. I think it's in Matthew. I'll leave this to you to look it up, but I think it was there, where Jesus asked his disciples. He said, "Who do men say that I am?" And they gave him an answer. They said, "Well, some say John the Baptist, and some say Elijah." And then he turned and he looked at them and he said, "Well, who do you say that I am?" And Peter spoke up. He said, "Well, you're the Son of the living God." And Jesus' response to that, I thought, is very telling. He said, "Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven." So he makes right there a very clear distinction that no amount of schooling or good teachers that you might have, good teachers that you might have, can possibly really show you who Jesus is. Only God himself can give us the revelation of who Jesus is. And that's what Jesus was getting at there in that passage. All right, so today I want to start in Mark chapter 1, and just we're going to walk through in Mark and John and Acts and Corinthians, and we're going to probably cover a lot of ground here. So I just ask that you stick with me. We're going to paint a little bit of a picture. We're going to kind of think about whether it's education or revelation. I didn't want to call this education versus revelation because I felt like that was kind of combative in a way. So I'm not, once again, not against education, but what we need when we read the scriptures and what we really need for life is revelation. All right, so Mark 1:21 through 22, this is where Jesus had called some disciples, and it says here in Mark 1:21-22, they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and began to teach. So this was the tradition of the day, that they didn't have necessarily a set teacher or schedule or program in the synagogue, but that these traveling rabbis would come along and they would get open mic night, if you know what I'm saying. So then in verse 22 it says they were amazed, or some Bibles might say astonished, at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one having authority and not as the scribes. So right here we see that Jesus operated from a different source than the scribes of his day. The scribes were highly educated and they were very well versed in the scriptures, and they probably could quote a lot of their teachers from the past, which once again is not a bad thing. But Jesus came along and he started, instead of referencing a bunch of other teachers or rabbis, he taught like this was coming from him. And the reason is because it was coming from him. It was coming from his Father, but it was coming from his real revelation and depth of wisdom that his Father had placed in him. And in fact, in John, he says, "My teaching is not my own, but I only say and do what I see my Father saying and doing." So he was getting directly from revelation from his Father. So his teaching had authority, rather than just book knowledge or quoting other teachers. when you believe what you teach, it comes through, and others will sense that authority. For us, you might say, well, that's Jesus, that's not me, that's not you, we're mere mortals. Well, I concede that. I can understand where you're coming from with that, but the point is still kind of the same. When Christ moves into you and I, then we have the teacher living within us. And he's the one that has the authority. But as we know him and as we have come to have confidence in him, then we too will have authority in what we're saying and teaching. And that when we teach others, it will be the means by which God brings revelation and not just some written form of education or memorization. Now look over in John chapter 3, familiar story to most Bible folks. John chapter 3 is where a man named Nicodemus shows up at night to question Jesus about his authority, his teaching. So we're going to read several verses here. In John 3, starting in verse 1, it says, "Now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, 'Rabbi, we know that you've come from God as a teacher, for no one can do the signs that you do unless God is with him.'" So Nicodemus is a teacher of the people, and he recognizes that Jesus also is a teacher. But Nicodemus doesn't quite know what the trick is, or what the book or the study guide or the conference, where did you go to get this ability to do what you're doing here, Jesus? Because he had multiplied the wine at the wedding, and they had heard about this, is what I'm assuming. So he's like, "Rabbi, well, show me the trick here." In John 3:3, Jesus answered and said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." Now this seems like an odd response to a question about Nicodemus. Well, I know that you come from God, because you couldn't be doing the things that you do unless God is with you. And Jesus' response to him is, "Nicodemus, you have to be born again." I think this tells us that Nicodemus wanted the latest teaching. He wanted to know what books he should read, or what conference he should attend, or what schools should he go to, and what kind of degree should he be after. But Jesus cut through all that, and he went straight to the real issue here, and he says, you need to be born. You have to be born from above. You need God's very own life within you. You need revelation that only comes through the Spirit of God. It doesn't come with great learning and books read. So then in verse 4, Nicodemus said to him, "How can a man be born when he's old? He cannot enter again a second time into his mother's womb and be born, can he?" See, Nicodemus is in the rational, logical, fallen man's mind here. He's trying to reason it out. And Jesus, see, he's talking to him on there's two different things going on here. Jesus is speaking spirit wisdom, and Nicodemus is trying to translate and receive that through fallen man's reasoning. Well, it doesn't work. Can't work that way. So Jesus answers, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not be amazed that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but do not know where it comes from and where it's going. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit." In other words, Nicodemus, I could just see Jesus knocking on his head, and he's saying, "Look, Nicodemus, your rational brain, your logical thinking here, your high education can't get you there. Can't get you there. That's still flesh. It might be a good thing, but it's still only flesh level. You need the Spirit of God in your spirit so that you can be born of the Spirit, and then you will have an understanding, and you will have wisdom, and be operating on a different level, a different plane of understanding." So there has to be a real shift from our logical, rational, earthly, and what I say, fallen earthly mind into the heavenly mind of Christ. So then in John 3:9, Nicodemus said to him, "How can these things be?" So he's struggling here. And Jesus answered and said to him, "Are you the teacher of Israel, and you do not understand these things? Truly, truly, I say to you, we speak of what we know and testify of what we have seen, and you do not accept our testimony. If I told you earthly things and you do not believe, how will you believe if I tell you heavenly things? No one has ascended into heaven but he who descended from heaven, the Son of Man. I think I'm going to stop right there on these verses. Jesus is telling him, Nicodemus, you can't get there from here. No number of degrees at the end of your name is going to get you born again. Can't work that way. I, for one, am very excited and happy to hear this, because not that I don't like to study or read or think that schooling might be important or helpful, but I think it's wonderful that it doesn't fall on me to learn my way into understanding God. That it's a gift, that it's God's very own gift to us when we get beat up and humbled enough and we finally cry out to Him and we recognize that His very life in us is what we need. Not just knowing or knowledge about Him, but that knowing in the biblical sense to become one with Him is what we need. So now, here's an illustration that we see in the early chapters of Acts. Look in Acts 4. Peter and John are having a rough way to go because the same folks that crucified Jesus and tried to shut down the program of the kingdom that Jesus had inaugurated when He showed up, the same people that witnessed miracles still had Jesus killed. And now, on the other side of the cross, on the other side of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit was poured out, and the early disciples were going around doing the same thing, acting and behaving exactly like Jesus did, and it brought them the same attention, which was not good for their fleshy, earthly lives. It was not good at all. For God's kingdom, it was wonderful. People were getting healed. Things were starting to happen. Beggars and lame people were walking, and the religious leaders were just having a fit. They didn't know what to do with it. So when you look in Acts 4, their response, when they tell them to stop talking about this Jesus, their response is, well, Acts 4:12, he says, and there is salvation in no one else, for there's no other name under heaven that has been given among men by which we must be saved. It's like, we can't stop talking about this. This is the truth. This is joy. This is life from heaven. This is God's plan. We're going to keep shouting it. So they stood in the face of abuse and imprisonment and even death, and they still proclaimed Jesus. And the response from the religious leaders, the educated of the day, was so great here. In Acts 4:13, it says, now as they observed the confidence of Peter and John, and understood that they were uneducated and untrained men. Now, the King James says it in a better way, I think. Ignorant and unlearned, I think, is the way they say it. They were amazed and began to recognize them as having been with Jesus. Wow. So the educated religious leaders, who were ones that were responsible for putting Jesus on that cross, were now having to deal with a multiplied Jesus, which is exactly what Jesus said. He told them, he said, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it does fall in the ground and dies, it will produce fruit, much fruit. So all of a sudden, we don't just have one man, Jesus. Now we got Matthew, we got John and James and Peter. And all of a sudden, Jesus is just multiplied. And now they're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to shut this down? What have we done? So they're shocked and amazed at Peter and them because they didn't have the formal education. They weren't religious scholars. They were fishermen, and they were ignorant and unlearned. They were not trained in the scriptures as these harumph Pharisees were. But they knew that they had been with Jesus. Now, which would you rather have? Would you rather have the degrees on the wall, or would you rather have people look at you and know that you had been with Jesus? All right. So now we get into some interesting verses that really, that was the beginning of my career, if you will, in studying the Scripture, and my revelation and coming to know who I was and who Christ in me was, and what God was really about, and how I needed the Spirit of God Himself to translate for me what life was all about. And it wasn't just going to happen by reading books or studying more. It was going to have to be a gift that God himself had to birth in me. 1 Corinthians 2, starting in verse 6. Now, the verses prior to this, Paul said, I came to you not with the excellency of speech or the wisdom of man or whatever, but I came preaching Christ and him crucified. But then he says in 1 Corinthians 2, verse 6, he says, yet we do speak wisdom among those who are mature. A wisdom, however, not of this age, nor of the rulers of this age who are passing away, but we speak God's wisdom in a mystery, the hidden wisdom which God predestined before the ages to our glory, the wisdom which none of the rulers of this age has understood. For if they had understood it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. So Paul's saying we have a wisdom that only God can give, and it really bypasses man's understanding altogether. It comes across until you receive by the Spirit. It's a secret wisdom. It's a hidden wisdom. It's a wisdom that God planned all along to reveal to us and for us, in us and through us, by way of the cross. But see, you had to keep it hidden so that the rulers of the day would have pushed on and crucified Jesus. Because if he was not crucified, if he was not buried and raised back, and if he had not ascended back into heaven to the right hand of his Father, then the Holy Spirit could not have been poured out. If the Holy Spirit had not been poured out, then none of us can be born again, saved, kept, given eternal life. We would have never had any ability to receive this deep, hidden, mysterious wisdom that God had planned all along to give to us for those that believe. So here we are in 1 Corinthians 2. Paul's telling us that there is a wisdom that goes deeper and further, or higher, maybe you could say. So look at this, 1 Corinthians 2:9. He says, just as it is written, and I like to quote a little bit here. These are some of the most powerful and most important verses in my Christian life. It says that eye has not seen nor ear heard, neither has entered into the heart of man the things that God has prepared for him. But God has revealed it unto us by his Spirit. See, lots of times we like to say, well, we can't know. God's, it's just stuff that we can't know. And I think what he's saying is we can't get there without him. Our natural eye hadn't seen it, and our natural heart and mind is not able to take it. But what we're talking about here is a supernatural gifting. We're talking about God pouring his Spirit into us and resurrecting our dead human spirit, giving us new eyes and putting his mind in us and giving us a new heart. See, the heart of man, the ears and the eyes of man without him, we can't get there. We can't get there from here. But God reveals it through his Spirit. And the Spirit searches all things, even the deep things, the depths of God. And then verse 11, for who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of a man which is in him? Even so, the thoughts of God no one knows except the Spirit of God. See, I can't really know what you're thinking. I mean, you can express it, and then I could maybe know, but ultimately, it says here that only the thoughts of man, the spirit of man is in here. Only I know my thoughts. And he's saying that when the Spirit of God is put into you, into me, then I can know God's thoughts. Whoa, that's amazing. And then verse 12 he says, now we receive not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, so that we may know the things freely given to us by God. There it is. So he says, eye has not seen, ear hasn't heard, and it's not entered into the heart of man, the things that God has prepared for them. But he has revealed it to us by his Spirit, and he wants us to know. He wants us to know these things freely given to us. He says, these things we speak, not in words taught by human wisdom, not just by mere education, but in those taught by the Spirit, combining the spiritual thoughts with spiritual words. Oh my gosh, so we can know the things of God, but we only know them by way of revelation, not just mere education. Verse 14, 1 Corinthians 2:14, but a natural man does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them, because they are spiritually appraised. But he who is spiritual appraises all things, yet he himself is appraised by no one. For who has known the mind of the Lord, that he will instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. So there you have it. So the religious leaders of Jesus' day were shocked by his teaching with authority. And then they were shocked again when James and Peter and John were continuing to preach Christ when they threatened them. They were like, these guys are not very smart, but yet they have been with Jesus. So they were starting to get a hold of the fact that something was going on in them that was supernatural. Nicodemus didn't get it. The religious leaders of the day didn't get it. Now, I'm not saying that, once again, I want to bring this back. I'm not saying to you it's a badge of honor to be stupid or ignorant. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is that man's wisdom and man's teaching can only get you so far. And you can never cross that bridge over into God's wisdom other than by His Spirit. And it's a gift. He's a gift. The Spirit of God is a gift to us because we have been humbled enough to be open and receive from Him. Now, I keep using the term religious leaders, but you know, the Apostle Paul was a religious leader. So it's not impossible that some highly educated person can get born again, right? But they have to come the same way the rest of us do. It doesn't matter how smart you are in the ways of the world or how ignorant you are. Both of these people, the ignorant and unlearned and the highly educated, both have to essentially give up their trust in whatever they're trusting, whether it's themselves or their education, their money, their tradition, their family name. You have to give that up, and you have to turn yourself to Christ, and you have to receive Him. He's the way by which we enter into the kingdom. He's the way we're born again. He is the wisdom of God, if you will. And He's our mind if we're a born-again person. Philippians 3, Paul he illustrates this beautifully here. Philippians 3, verse 3, he says, "We are the true circumcision who worship in the Spirit of God and glory in Christ Jesus and put no confidence in the flesh. Although I myself might have confidence even in the flesh, if anyone else has a mind to put confidence in the flesh, I far more." Sometimes the Apostle Paul speaks in what they call hyperbole, exaggerated speech, and he's making a point. He says, if anybody was going to brag about how great they are in the flesh, it would be me. So he says, verse 5, "Circumcised on the 8th day of the nation of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to the righteousness which is in the law, found blameless." See, he's the man. Paul was highly educated. He could trace his heritage back to all the right people. He was first in his class. He was circumcised. Both of his parents were pure-blooded Hebrews. He had no mixture in his bloodline. I mean, he was a law man through and through. But look what he found out. Philippians 3:7. "But whatever things were gained to me, those things I have counted as loss for the sake of Christ." He counts it all loss. "More than that, I count all things to be lost in view of the surpassing value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them but rubbish." King James says dung. It's a big pile, "so that I may gain Christ and may be found in Him, not having a righteousness of my own derived from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness which comes from God on the basis of faith, that I may know Him and the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of His sufferings, being conformed to His death, in order that I may attain to the resurrection from the dead." So Paul said, I was highly educated. Everything about my life on the surface, from the earthly view, would have been perfect, and people would have been jealous of me, and I would have been top of the class, and I would have been leading the charge. And in fact, he was. When Christ started teaching his wisdom, God's wisdom, and he started revealing to the disciples, and the church came to be, the Apostle Paul, who was known by Saul then, thought it was his job, that God had called him to shut that thing down. He's thinking, this is not from God. This is a cult. This is heresy. Jesus is a false prophet. I got to shut this down. So that's what he tried to do. But in the midst of him attempting to do that, Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, showed up and he said, "Why are you doing this? Why are you fighting what you claim to be trying to do?" He rewired his mind. Had to rewire his mind. And changed everything about the course of Paul's life. And then Paul quickly realized I'm just giving up on my education. The path I was on was wrong, and I'm not going that way anymore. I'm going to be in hot pursuit of Jesus and coming to know Him, knowing Him, not just about Him, not just some education that the world might respect or pat me on the back for. He said, but I lost it all. I gave it up. I freely gave up and lost all things for the sake of knowing Christ. Wow. So that's what we do. We have to bring whatever it is we are to the table, and we say, Lord, I'm giving up all this. Whatever I was trusting in, whatever I thought was stable or was important, I now see it was just a big pile of nothing compared to knowing you. So now, look back with me in 1 Corinthians again, 1 Corinthians 1. The Apostle Paul started this letter with this because I think the Corinthians, like the Greeks, the philosophers of the day were always searching out, trying to be educated, trying to learn what the truth is. They're looking for wisdom in all the wrong places, you might say. 1 Corinthians 1, verse 20, he says, where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God, God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. For indeed Jews ask for signs and Greeks search for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, to Jews a stumbling block, and to Gentiles foolishness. But to those who are the called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God, because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. I'm telling you, when I first got born again, the very next morning I started reading these words, and they revolutionized everything about my understanding of myself, life, God, others, the purpose and meaning of everything. Because I started to realize that the world truly was upside down. It was so upside down through the fall, and that what God highly valued, fallen men despised. And what men thought was so great, God thought was foolishness. It's so true. And I have learned that more and more as my years go by walking with Christ, that my value system before Him was totally foolish. It really was. So look in 1 Corinthians 1:26. For consider your calling, brethren, that there were not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble, but God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the things which are strong. See, this is when the light really started to come on for me. I got born again, and the next morning I started reading these words, and mind you, I was in the middle of recovery. I was on methadone, still struggling with the idea of getting away from addiction. This was in 2001. And by God's Spirit, I did get free, and I've been free ever since. It's been 20 years now. And it's all because of Christ's keeping, but it was because I saw myself in here too, and I realized that God chooses foolish things. And you really think about it, what's more foolish than someone that has gotten tangled up in addiction with drugs and alcohol, and it warps your mind, and it messes with your perspective of everything. But God can free you. He freed me. He totally set me free. But God chooses what the world says is foolish, and He chooses what the world says is weak. And then in 1 Corinthians 1:28, and the base things, the low things of the world, and the despised God has chosen, the things that are not, so that He may nullify the things that are. See, He picks low-down drug addicts and ex-cons, and even cons, people in jail, people out of jail. He picks prostitutes and harlots. He picks people that have had abortions. He picks people that have murdered people and stolen things and lived very ungodly lifestyles, full of fleshly cravings, and just giving themselves over to any kind of thing that pulls on them. Anything that they think is good, they just do it, and God intervenes. And He turns that person around. And then all of a sudden, the watching world, the world that had been watching this addict, this murderous, thieving, adulterer, this fleshy guy, this fleshy woman in the world looks and goes, what in the world? What in the world's going on there? And then they perceive that you've been with Jesus. And it's not because you're so highly educated, but it's because your life has been transformed by the power of the Spirit of God. It's not that you did anything. Look in 1 Corinthians 1:29, so that no one may boast before God. But by His doing you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, and righteousness, and sanctification, and redemption. So that just as it is written, let him who boasts, boast in the Lord. God picks what the world cast away, and He transforms them. And they know they can't brag about it. They realize that I was in a trap I couldn't get out of. I was locked in a stronghold of addiction, and I know without a doubt that God Himself, by way of His Spirit, pulled me out. He rescued me from the domain of darkness, and He transferred or translated me into the kingdom of His Son, where I have forgiveness. And an inheritance is what He's promised me. So don't get caught up thinking that you got to be the smartest person in the room. But I will say, you do have to have the Spirit of God in your life, because without Him, you're not going to make it. There's a verse here in 2 Timothy 3, verse 7 is a dangerous place to be. It says that there are some that are always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. So we can have great education, which might even make us lots of money, might make us a lot of friends, and it might open a lot of doors. No doubt about it. But if we don't come to the knowledge of the truth, which is Christ in you, Christ Jesus is the truth. If we don't come to that, then we're just going to ever be learning, and we're going to find ourselves caught up in a spin cycle of attempting to try and fail and try and fail, which God can use that too, no doubt about it. Most of us do find ourselves in that place at some point or the other, which is what finally leads us to the frustration, to where we cry out deep from our heart and we say, God, I can't do this. And then we come to know the last couple of verses that I have here. I'm amazed we made it. 1 Corinthians 1, 18 through 19. 1 Corinthians 1, 18 and 19 tell us the story. The world can't take what we're talking about here, not until they get born again. 1 Corinthians 1, 18 and 19 tells us this: For the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside. So, I just want you to know that we need the Spirit of God. We need revelation from Him. We need His mind, the mind of Christ, operating through us, as us, operating according to His mind, putting our faith in His faithfulness. That's how we get through. That's how we see the kingdom. That's how we operate in the kingdom. That's how we rest. That's how the love and joy and peace, all of the fruit of the Spirit listed in Galatians, that's how that He produces that through our life. It's not because we're so smart, but it's because we've been enlightened. It's because we've been awakened. It's because we've been born again. It's because we have gotten revelation from our Father who is in heaven. All right, I hope this has helped you. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. And until the next Louie File, I'll see you then.